Well, I'm so glad everybody's on this call today. I want to welcome you. This is the first NCA CPA Financial Planning Networking Group's virtual meeting. I'm Jermaine Weldon. I'm a CPA financial planner, and I'm the chair of this group. And what our goal is to be able to provide high quality, objective financial planning information to our NCA CPA community and their guests. So today we have three very good top CPA financial planners. They're really experts in the field here in North Carolina. You may know some of them. We have Paula McMillan, Sarah Bradley, and Carolyn Larson Weber, and they're going to talk together as a panel addressing making the most of your money in 2021 and beyond. I know many of you know them, but I'm going to do a little brief outline of their bio in case you've never met any of them. Paula has a CFP, CPA, PFS, and CGMA designation. She's a frequent contributor to programs like this with the NCA CPA. And she's been published and quoted in a number of publications, U.S. News and World Report, Kiplinger's, the Business Journal. She serves on a number of committees in her field, including the AICPA's Personal Financial Specialist Credentialing Committee, their conference committee, the Society of Financial Service Professionals, and she has founded and chaired the Plenteous Financial Forum and NCA CPA Triad Women's Initiative Group. So financial planning runs through her blood. This is her passion, and she will tell you that. Sarah Bradley, she's also a CPA financial planner, and she worked for over a decade with the AICPA and in the personal financial specialist area. So, in fact, when you see slides from the AICPA on personal financial planning issues, odds are Sarah had her hands on those slides at some point. So she's very knowledgeable. And a number of times she has been nominated and awarded the CPA Practice Advisors 40 Under 40 for CPAs who are leading, innovating, collaborating to provide unity and visibility for our accounting field. So Carolyn, who's been on several programs with me and has also participated and is a contributor, she has her CPA and her personal financial planning designation, her PFS, 27 years experience in tax planning, working with Ernst & Young and KPMG and their personal financial planning groups and wealth management groups. Again, she's also been a contributor to the NCA CPA. So we've really got some top people on this call to answer our questions. I do want to do a little bit of housekeeping before we start with these planners. If you have a question, just put it in the chat and then we're going to answer those questions at the end. If we cannot answer them, we're going to attempt to answer them by email, and then Holly can send it out. And somebody's asking a question about Zoom, but it looks like they figured it out. So that's good. So anyway, one thing we all recognize is all these people in this room, you know, you're a CPA or you're a professional, and we're from a really diverse background. But these CPA financial planners are also dealing with a very diverse background. So we feel confident that the information they can give today will either be able to resonate with you or resonate with some of the clients you serve. So I'm going to start with Sarah. So Sarah, this has been a crazy year with a pandemic, civil unrest, a contentious election, and we didn't start the new year too well, easily. Also, so with the broad spectrum of clients that you serve and with all this chaos, what was their greatest concern and how did you address it this past year?
Well, thank you, Jermaine, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you guys today. In our practice, we primarily focus on integrated financial planning and taxes. We don't do investment advisory services like Carolyn and Paula do, so I'll let them speak to that. But what we heard a lot of concerns about were with taxes. What do the CARES Act and the pandemic relief efforts mean for our tax situation? What does President Biden's proposed tax plan that he shared during his campaign mean for me? You know, while some things are clear now, like President Biden taking office last week, we have a flipped Senate with Vice President Harris holding the tiebreaker vote. And we don't have a crystal ball to know exactly what potential new tax laws will look like, but here's what we do know. The new administration is immediately focusing on stimulus, pandemic relief, and vaccinations. And we know that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act sunsets in 2025. So unless prior action is taken, we know tax rates are going to go back up at that point, and the estate exemption amount is going to go down from 11.5 million to 5.5 million. Do we know if President Biden's administration will have any success or take any action on tax policy before then? You know, we don't know. But what we have been sharing with our clients, and you know, what our focus has been, is to make the best decisions with the information that we have now. And that means creating a flexible plan that prioritizes your time, your energy, and your resources on what's most important and meaningful to you. So that typically, you know, especially this year, this last year, has looked like a multi-year, multi-strategy planning opportunity.
Well, thank you. That actually does a lot of food for thought there, because that is something that has concerned a lot of people. Well, Carolyn, what have you seen and what are ways that you've been able to deal with your clients' concerns?
Yeah, so it's been one of those years, right? And so, you know, we as CPAs, we were feeling it, right? The market going down over 20% and COVID coming and having to work at home. So our clients were feeling it the same. I had some clients that are basically that were retiring in this year. Wow, what a issue to be facing. So they were facing fear about COVID, fear because the market was going down, and fear because they were heading into retirement and they really didn't know what to do. So what I had to help them with was, first of all, you know, as CPAs, right, we're almost like financial therapists, right? If you're a CPA and you're in the tax world, you still have to address those issues with your clients. They're like, oh, am I paying too much taxes? Well, in the financial planning world, you know, they're afraid about taxes and financial planning. So a lot of what I had to do was basically two things. Number one, you have to be empathetic and you have to say, hey, you know what? We don't know either, and I'm afraid, and I get where you are. But then we have to go on beyond that and say, you know, this is what we can control. And so here are some things that we can do. So we talked about diversification. We talked about, you know, modeling in their plan. And then we talked about, I like to talk about seeing the opportunities, right? So there were some silver linings this year. So with the market going down and them coming into retirement, they can actually take advantage because the market is down and it's a buying opportunity. So basically, you know, being the emotional support and also giving them some education and some fortitude to stand in place and do some discipline, techniques.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So, Paula, what about you? What was top of mind to your clients, and how did you address it?
Okay, thank you, Jermaine. We basically do a lot of communication. We over communicate. In fact, we usually have a chat that goes out every 2 weeks. And this time we added a live chat that we were doing sometimes bi-weekly. And so I think a lot of that, the fact that we were doing it ahead of time and then during the pandemic, it helped calm them somewhat because, you know, you want to tackle all the issues as they happen and give them a little bit of visibility and let them know that we're thinking of them and we're not hiding and waiting to see what happens. So for each client, we took a very customized approach. For instance, with taxes, which is what is on everyone's mind, we were careful to say to some of our clients that we're not in the top tax brackets that, we don't feel like your taxes are going to change drastically. And with Biden's plan, he's looking at people with income over 400,000, and with, I guess they're talking about changing that top tax bracket from 37 to 39 and a half. And, a lot of clients don't realize it. They just feel like, oh, taxes have to go up. And so they have some knee-jerk reactions, and there's a lot of general knowledge in the market. Like, I'll use an example like Roth conversions. It seems like that was very much in style and everyone was recommending them. But as Sarah, Carolyn, and Jermaine and I can all attest, when you put someone's plan into a financial plan, sometimes a Roth conversion is not what's best for them in their particular situation. So there are many times that clients wanted to do a Roth conversion that we said, no, wait, because of your age and stage and what else you have coming into your portfolio, a Roth conversion is not best for you. So it was just very, very customized. But as mentioned, we do investment management. So I do feel like it's important to emphasize how stressful it has been for clients, the behavioral piece. I found that a lot of people were on the two sides. Like, everyone was either, I need to get in, and then, what am I missing out on? What opportunities? How can I invest more? Or they were like, I want to not necessarily go to cash, but they were like, I'm really worried about what's going on. It's almost like political environment we're in, that people were kind of taking sides. It's just making them very nervous. So when you asked what did we do about it, just like Carolyn had alluded to, very diversified. We were always diversified, but probably even more so. Clients were offering them more alternatives now because so many asset values are across the board, are richly valued. And so we look to alternatives, maybe like timber, agriculture, farmland that should do well with the blue wave. Private equity that involves a lot of different companies, like in a healthcare fund, as opposed to just one company. So avoiding those concentrated opportunities, but just being diversified. And there are some new offerings in the market relatively over the past few years, funds that allow you to do some hedging so that you have an established ceiling and floor for clients that are very risk averse, or even for most portfolios, just to give them somewhat of a some ballast to their portfolio to keep the volatility low. You can actually have like a guaranteed range for an outcome. So we were able to incorporate that in portfolios. So, and then finally, just cash. I suppose that's important to mention, depending on where someone was at, their job security, how close they were to retirement, certainly larger cash positions. And finally, I guess I would say international and emerging markets, although there are certainly concerns there. But with the S&P 500, where we're at, when you look at trends, there are some concerns. We're not, no one can figure out exactly when you might have a correction, but we certainly want to take advantage of opportunities to be diversified and have all the football players on the field.
Well, thank you. Well, some of the things that I hear that it sounds like all three of you are talking about is, looking at the client as a whole, like looking at their whole situation, why maybe a tax change or a Roth conversion would work or not work, but also looking at it as, always being diversified and then trying to have a strategy. And does this strategy meet with their needs? And that's what financial planners do. So going back to Sarah, with all of this information and all of these conversations that you're having, with your clients, did your clients make different decisions with what all the chaos and all the activity going on last year? What kind of decisions did they make?
Jermaine, that's a great question. And we have a variety of clients, and really they each have a unique financial setting and life setting. As Paula indicated, just, focusing on who they are as a person or a family and customizing their plan with who they are, what they do, and why they do it. A lot of our families were spending a lot more time at home this year. So it was an opportunity to reflect on how they spend their time, energy, and money. Some of them did make different decisions, some drastic, some, perhaps a little tweak here and there along the way. It was an opportunity to check in with them on their financial plan and highlight whether they were on the right track or whether they needed or even wanted to make an adjustment. Carolyn mentioned the example of one of the families she worked with considering whether or not to retire this year and how the conversation might have been different than it was perhaps a year ago or even 5 years ago. One of the couples that we work with, the husband is passionate about restoring vintage cars. And in the past, they've always prioritized travel so that they could visit with their children who are spread all across the country. And with the limitations on travel, this year was an opportunity to reorient his plan so that he could focus on the restoration of his vintage cars while he was healthy enough to still do it with his two hands. So he felt pulled to focus on that, and we modeled around what that would look like. And it worked for him. So he was happy with the outcome, fortunately. One of our other business owner clients, he has a seasonal hospitality business in New York City, and their season opens in April, which, if you remember, last year was the time when New York City was hit really, really hard with COVID. So we had to take a step back and look holistically at his financial settings and create a plan that prioritized health, safety, and financial stability, not just for him, but for the contractors that he works with, the vendors that he works with, and everyone that was impacted. So it's more than just one person in that situation. We had to be thinking even broader than just the one person financial setting.
Good, thank you. Well, I bet, people were making different decisions and having to reevaluate. Carolyn, what did you see? What did you see with your clients in terms of, did they make any changes with what was going on?
Yeah, for sure. I had some clients that, in a normal year, a non-COVID year, we would be really modeling, the things that they dream about when they retire, right? We'd be modeling renovations to their home. We'd be modeling maybe some travel now that they're retiring. And we were going to go into that, and then COVID hit, and they then they were fearful of the COVID and the election. So, you have to meet your clients where they are. And so I realized the traditional planning we really couldn't do. So, we went into, okay, what can we do to bring these clients, more peace of mind? And so we really talked about, saving more cash. We talked about, yes, we understand you want to travel and you want to do these other things, but actually we're going to push that out into another year. We talked about really hard, the asset allocation that they needed to be in, and should we dial it back? And what kind of growth do they need for their plan? And then I had another client who definitely remembered what happened in 2008 and 2009. And he says, Carolyn, I don't want to go through that again. So, we met with his advisor and we said, hey, can we dial back the risk, switch it up and still meet our goals? And so that's what we were doing. So we were doing a lot of modeling based on what was going on this year. So.
Thank you. Well, Paula, what about you? Did you have any clients and make different decisions this past year?
I did. One example that comes to mind are two brothers that live in different parts of the country, and they are both close to retirement, but they like to send me questions like, what if I do this and what if I do that? And all three of us, you as well as Carolyn and Sarah, would say that's part of the value of a financial plan. If you have all that information already about them, then you can answer questions on the fly. So one of them wanted to say, Paula, I wanted to purchase an RV for $75,000. And just the year before, we had pushed it to the limit with the size house that he wanted to build. Well, I guess it was 2 years before that. And then when I called him back, he said, no, he's changed it to a $95,000 RV. So this is kind of what you experience as a financial planner, is everyone on this call can attest that does this. So, you know, I kind of lost some sleep over that. I'll be honest. I kept thinking about him, and, you know, you get really tied up because you're giving people advice. And so ultimately I got comfortable with it. We talked about it. He's going to rinse it out part of the time. And well, you know, we had some creative ideas around it. Well, at the same time, I'm getting emails from his brother saying that he's not going to go back to work. He's kind of does some international speaking, and he said, I'm just not going to pick that up. I don't, you know, make sure my plan works. And he changed his expenses, some of them around, and so we did that. So that's an example of two people, one that wanted to enjoy his retirement with the RV, and another that wanted to start his retirement early because it's just, you know, a little harder to get those international speaking engagements with COVID, and doesn't know what it's going to be like after that.
Well, it sounds like COVID changed more than us just working from home. It actually changed how we think about work and how we think about our money and what do we want to do with our money and what we can do and cannot do. Yeah, and that's what financial planners do. And yes, I think most of the financial planners are like you, where they stay up at night trying to figure out, was that really a good thing to do? So I share that with you. Well, Carolyn, I'm going to come back to you as a financial planner. What advice did you give, or what thought did you come up with that your client would not have come up with on their own?
Oh, well, this is kind of my favorite answer. Roth conversions. So remember that client that I told you about that was afraid of going into retirement, and, you know, they were afraid of the, you know, all the things going on. Well, I'm a girl that's the glass is half full kind of girl. And then I said, I know you're afraid, but let's flip it and say, what are the opportunities here? And in their particular situation, because they're retiring early and they have other assets besides their big retirement account, it made it a great opportunity to show them in the plan and in Excel the value of the Roth conversion. I mean, you saw a client that was going from, you know, very sad and fearful to, like, all of a sudden smiles and saying, oh my gosh, thank you for showing this. And, you know, and so what we're doing is we're doing a series of Roth conversions. And so that was my favorite one. The one other thing that we were suggesting for my other clients is under the CARES Act, if you were taking your required minimum distribution, the CARES Act said you really didn't have to take it. So I sent out to all my clients, say, hey, let's take a look and see if you don't need the RMD this year, you know, let's take a look at, you know, foregoing it, and maybe there's some other opportunities. So those are the two things that come to my mind right now.
Thank you. Those would sound like very good things. Well, Sarah, what about you? What kind of recommendations did you come up with that, if left to their own devices, they would not have done?
Well, you know, what we have seen with many of the families that we work with, and perhaps true for almost everyone, is that death is a really hard thing to talk about, especially when you think about your own mortality. And, you know, pick a survey, pick a statistic, you know, if there's 75 people on this call, probably 50 of us don't have their estate documents in place. And perhaps 25 of us haven't looked at them in a year or more, or several years. So one thing that, you know, we always want to make sure to do at least once a year, and if not, whenever there's a major life event, is to be looking at those estate documents if they're already drafted. And if they're not in place, to get them in place as quickly as possible. You know, and I think that the pandemic has highlighted for us this year that clients are rethinking and families are rethinking instructions on not having respiratory assistance, such as a ventilator, as part of their healthcare directive. And is that something they want to reconsider, given the impact that COVID has had on folks being hospitalized and many of them being put on ventilators? And if you have a child who is over the age of 18 and not married, it's really, really important to make sure that there's a healthcare power of attorney in place so that you as the parent or the guardian or whomever, the trusted person, can make a healthcare decision on behalf of that person, on the child that's over 18 and not married. If they don't have anyone to advocate for themselves, such as a spouse, and if they're of legal age, they no longer have the parent to be able to do that for them. That's one thing that we have identified that many of our families have not considered yet. So that's one of the most important things. We first make sure all of our families have their estate documents in place. And while we don't draft them, we do make sure that they fit with their financial plan.
Thank you. In fact, it was on another call that I had with you that you really brought it to mind about having adult children off at college, really having estate planning documents on them or power of attorney, because you don't have authority to get their medical records or speak for them. And so that's an important thing. Well, Paula, what about yourself? What was your brainiest idea that your clients didn't think about on their own?
Well, we certainly did a lot of Roth conversions as well, given the opportunity the market gave us. And estate planning documents, we review all of our clients' estate planning documents. And as Sarah said, it was especially important now to be sure that, the proper language was in them for COVID. But I would say something that we do regularly that clients are not aware of or may underappreciate is all the tax loss harvesting we do on a regular basis in managing their assets. Many of you are familiar, but just in case you aren't, a lot of people throw around that term. But that's when you take what someone's invested in and then you sell that fund when it's down and then you reinvest it in something very similar. And so you're able to save up that loss to be able to offset a gain somewhere else. And particularly with what Sarah said, with taxes projected to go up, it's good to go ahead and do as much tax loss harvesting as you can, sometimes in advance, depending on the person's tax bracket. Now and in the future, what you projected to be in the future, looking at those two pieces.
And I can't stress how that's important. Is I've inherited a client that has 200 and 300% gains in portfolio. There was never any tax loss harvesting. And she has over $500,000 in gains. And it's like, it's great to make a lot of money, but there could have been tax loss harvesting going in all those 10, 12 last years that we wouldn't be in a situation that, it's hard for us to rebalance with all these gains in there. And it was simply, there was no tax loss harvesting. That's an important thing. Well, Paula, I'm going to jump back to you because you've actually spoken a lot and written a lot on issues dealing with women. That's really one of your passions in addition to financial planning. And we hear in the news that the pandemic seems to have hit women more than the rest of the population. We just have men and women. But, what have you seen and what have you read? What has been the impact on women with this pandemic?
Yeah, thank you, Jermaine. I do a lot nationally on both Social Security and women, but women in particular. The reason I'm especially interested in getting the word out is the pandemic hit them in all the ways they were already hurt. And I think it's just under communicated. Number one, living longer. Life expectancy has increased by 10 years since the 1960s, and women are living longer than men. And in many cases, I meet with clients, and if there's a man involved, many will say, that's okay, Paula, she's not that interested. She knows to call you if something happens to me. And I'll continue to subtly just say, are you sure, she wouldn't want to be involved in this? Or, I just subtly try to bring her in, because so many times women are brought in when they lose a spouse because they've outlived them or divorce, and then they're totally unprepared, and it can be very costly. So first is living longer. That women tend to live longer, making less, and this has a lot of different implications. Women make 70 cents on every dollar that a man makes. They tend to invest less, and they invest more conservatively. you think about it, all the language around investing is around sports. Women are more goal oriented. They want to accomplish their goals for their whole family, as opposed to beating the market. You won't hear a woman, or it's very rare. I don't hear women talk about beating the market or those sorts of things. They're more into, I want to put my kids through college, and I'm worried about this child, and my mother, she's experiencing some Alzheimer's. How am I going to take care of her? So that goes to the third thing. So one is living longer. Second is making less, investing less, and investing conservatively. And then the caregiver. It's usually the woman that plays the caregiver role. And Putnam has estimated that can be as much as $325,000 in her lifetime. But if you think about that, if you get pulled out of work to take care of your kids, your parents, his parents, those are years you're not contributing to your retirement plans. Those are years you're not contributing to Social Security. Those are years you may give up, you may have to work part-time. You may give up a promotion, so it could be more subtly, or you may just not work at all. So there's just a lot of implications, and I think women are not as aware of this. And we're all planning. I think Sarah, Carolyn, Jermaine, all of us are planning for people to live to age 100, because that's it's a very good likelihood that one person in a marriage is going to live to age 100, and most likely it's her. And so if she can be prepared, she will have a better outcome.
Yeah, thank you. That is, and we do hear bits and pieces of this in the news, and I think with you studying it a lot and paying attention, I think it is worthwhile for, as women, to, whether we're working with women or for ourselves, that we really pay attention to some of these things, because we do get pulled. And I was one of the women that got pulled out of the workplace for about 9 or 10 years before I went back in. And when I went back in, I went very gradually and slowly. I didn't do, 80-hour work weeks like all the men. And so it does make a difference. So, Carolyn, any thoughts or recommendations in that area of dealing with females, or how you work with them, or things that are issues related to them?
Sure. I think I just, want to iterate what Paula said. Now I have, in my practice, I have couples, and I do have single women. They're either single because they're divorced or they're widowed. So what I try to do with my couples is I like to model, let's take a look at the husband dying first and see what that does. Yeah, do you have enough life insurance? Because basically, pretty much statistically, right? If the woman doesn't get involved, they're gonna have to be holding the bag, or so what I say. So it's important that, number one, when we model, even though they say, well, I'm not gonna live till 90, I said, well, we're gonna model till age 100 for sure. Because there's a statistic out there, if you're age 50, you have a 50-50 chance of going beyond 100. So even the insurance products now are modeling the insurances for folks that are living to 120. I know it's wild, but so just modeling, make sure you model your financial plan for them living longer. Make sure we model to understand what their financial plan looks like with them living alone, right? Because from a tax standpoint too, a couple married filing joint, right? The rates are much better. When the spouse is by themselves, the rates are single. So that makes a big impact too, because, Social Security, if they were taking Social Security, and now there's just one of them, right? They're actually going to get a little pay cut if they had both working years. And the last thing is really, I want to reiterate what Paula said, is I do find that women are more concerned, I just want a safe and secure retirement. I don't care about beating the market. So it's more about educating, hey, your portfolio has to be diversified, right? And you need the growth portion to keep up with inflation. And you need the fixed income to be the stable part. So you just can't all go into stable. You've got to have a growth piece and you have to have a stable piece. So it's about educating them, just in a little different way. So
So they cannot just have this 100% CD portfolio.
no,
They have to have risk. Okay.
right. And I do have women that say, just show me if I put it all in cash. I'm like, okay, I'll show you.
And then you won't have any money when you're 85 years old.
Right.
Well, Sarah, I know you brought up something in one of our conversations about dealing with women, and you want to share that with about one of the things about that you see with working with women?
Thank you, Jermaine. Yeah, so, I think one of the things that women are great at is surrounding themselves with people who are trusted advisors, good friends, good family members, people who can be a sounding board for them. We recently had a client who divorced. She came to us after her divorce for financial planning. Her husband was the primary financial person in the family and made all the decisions and kind of led the charge with that. So she was very cautious and a little bit hesitant and unsure of herself when it came to making financial decisions. And she's a smart, savvy, but just very sweet woman. And over the course of the year that we worked with her in educating her on the financial planning aspects and the things that she was considering now that, she was in this new life setting, we really had the opportunity to see her gain confidence in making financial decisions for herself in her new setting. And it was just such a blessing. I think Carolyn and Paula have probably had similar experiences with the families and the individuals that they work with. But, she took the opportunity to start where she was at her, stage of life. And she was a late life divorce situation. But, she took ownership of her financial future. She found a trusted advisor in us who could be her sounding board and, make sure that, when working with families or couples, be sure to, if you're the woman in the relationship, make sure that they're included in the meetings and participating in the conversations. One of the things that we do with all of our families is to take them through a life planning process, either at the start of the engagement when we work with them for the first time or whenever they feel like they need to have a brush up on that. And we always like to do it separately, to have each individual do their life plan and their goals and then bring it back together if they're a couple and sort of mesh them together. So it gives each of them the opportunity to highlight what's most important to them.
Yeah. I really like what you said about having ownership, having them feel like this is theirs, having ownership, but also helping them build up some confidence. Because I think all of us have had, and I think I shared with you having a recent widow that we had everything all figured out, and then she had to call someone where some of the assets were, and he was a salesman, and he just really berated her like she didn't know what she was doing, and it just rattled her so bad she had to think about it. She had to call her sister the next day and get calmed down, and it was like how easily she was rattled and persuaded by someone that she didn't know what she was doing, and she really did know what she was doing, but she didn't have that confidence yet. She was working on it. Well, I'm going to ask all three of you this question and all of us see this in the news and read it in magazine, the issue of longevity. So what are clients thinking about longevity? Carolyn, I'll start with you. What are some of the issues that you hear about longevity with your clients?
Okay, well, I'm gonna focus my answer on Social Security specifically, right? So as you do a financial plan, it's diversified. You're looking at where the income is going to come from, and of course, Social Security is one area that we look at. People are living longer, as Paula mentioned, and we've mentioned here before. So my financial plan goes to 100, and you inevitably get that question or that fear. Hey, I think, is Social Security going to go bust? right? And so, here's the statistics. And if Social Security was not meant to be everything for your retirement plan, right? It's only supposed to supplement it. Social Security is a pay-as-you-go system. So right now, the people that are working are paying for the people who get the benefits. So this Social Security trust fund is, if we don't do anything with Social Security, people will get 100% of their benefit all the way up to year 2034. That's if we don't do anything. And so also, if we don't do anything beyond 2034, people will get about 76% of their benefits. So, that's what, 13 years from now. So 13 years, there's a lot that Congress can do to fix this. And so, there's no guarantees. So we can plan for, in the modeling, we can, for those younger people, we can take a portion of their Social Security. And then the last thing I want to say about Social Security is, when we are doing modeling, there's all sorts of strategies, especially if there's a married couple. But generally, as a rule of thumb, if you're going to live beyond age 83 or 84, from a mathematical standpoint, it's better to wait until, your retirement age, or actually until age 70. So if you're 67 and that's when you're going to get your benefit, if you just wait the 3 years to age 70, you're going to increase your benefit by 24%, because from retirement age to age 70, the benefit goes up by 8% per year. So that's just one of the things. But if you listen to Ted Serinsky from the AICPA, he'll always say, look, there's a mathematical answer and there's an emotional answer. And so I give my clients the mathematical answer, but then I also say this: if that, amount that you're going to get from Social Security is going to, create more quality in your life, then, that's a different answer. And that's a decision that you can, make on your own. And sometimes the answer is just go ahead and take it, but it's up to them. So.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Well, I know Social Security is always on a lot of people's mind, and often I'm sure you have clients that they don't understand exactly how it works. They don't understand what happens when one spouse dies, or if they're in their late 50s or early 60s, they don't understand what you just pointed out, that if you delay your Social Security, that it will be a much larger amount, which if you're going to have longevity, you're going to want that larger amount. Well, Sarah, what about you? What are some issues on longevity that you deal with?
Sure. So certainly the Social Security issue is a big one, and it is quite complex. From our perspective, though, long-term care insurance is typically something that we get a lot of questions about from the families that we work with. And the advantage of long-term care insurance is that it provides an opportunity for you to retain your independence, to protect your assets, and to maintain your standard of living, while still having a broad range of access to long-term care options. So we know that long-term care insurance provides coverage for what's known in the profession as personal and custodial care. That's non-skilled care. So Medicare and other medical insurances typically only cover skilled care. So it sort of creates a more flexible situation for you to be able to have access to long-term care options should you need them, but not necessarily need a medically necessary skilled person to help you with those health issues. So some things that you'll want to think about when you're considering long-term care insurance is your age. The younger you are, the healthier you are, typically the lower your premiums will be. So think about, how old are you? What's your health like? What's your family history, your family health history? Do you have a fair amount of assets that you want to make sure you pass on to your loved ones or to give to charity? Do you have income from other sources? We talked about Social Security, but is there employment income or investment income? Could you potentially self-insure the cost of health or long-term care insurance? Can you afford the long-term care premium without really changing your lifestyle and your expenses? So again, really the younger and healthier you are, the lower your premiums are going to be. So just there's kind of that sweet spot to be thinking about long-term care insurance and whether it's right for your setting.
Thank you. Well, Paula, ending up back with you on long-term care. What's the topic in there that you deal with or you have some expertise in?
Well, I do focus on retirement planning and women, two separate topics. But part of retirement planning, I just want to underscore one more thing about Social Security, because Carolyn hit on everything. And the reason I started speaking nationally on Social Security and I wrote the article for the AICPA Tax Advisor was because I was sitting at an AICPA conference between two CPAs that were in public practice that were having a conversation across me. I always tell my clients to claim Social Security as soon as they can. The other said, oh yeah, always at age 62. So there is so much misinformation about Social Security that you're almost guaranteed to get it wrong if you read generic advice. So I think anybody on this call would be happy to talk to you. I have two people, someone from Minnesota and another person locally, that have called me just this week that I'm going to give them some advice on their Social Security planning, because it really is for a lot of people where the retirement planning begins. And I don't think it's going away. So I hope that, you will question that if that's something you've been told, because the misinformation, I think, has cost a lot of people. But secondly, as Sarah said so aptly, long-term care is not included in Medicare. But Medicare is something that people are, or let's just say Medicare Medicare in terms of whether you do a supplemental or a Medicare Advantage plan, that those are questions that people have a lot, and you're really not going to know until the end of your life if you chose the right one. So I'd like to give you a few tips on Medicare. Number one, Medicare Advantage programs typically have lower premiums, but if you get into trouble, you'll have wished you had a supplemental plan. So you just don't know. The best thing to do is look at your family history and what your parents did, grandparents did, what medical problems they may have had. And if you wait till you have a medical problem, you can't get on a supplemental policy. So you kind of have to make that decision up front before you have the problem. And I always encourage people to look at Plan G, because that plan basically, it includes everything except for everything Plan F, which was formerly the Cadillac plan that included everything, includes everything except for this little about $200 premium once a year. So the premiums that you pay overall for Plan G will be the better value if you're looking for a extensive plan. And now you can get plans that are like where you just pay almost like HSA, where you don't pay until you pay premiums, but it's a high deductible plan. So you can get those, and I would encourage you to look at those, because it's like up to about $2,500 you pay out of pocket, and then they kick in. So it makes your premium less expensive. Another thing is to always look at your plan every year, because drug plans change, the drugs you're on change, and the prices of those drugs within the plans change. So you can many times save a significant amount of money by doing that. Those are some of the main things. There is also IRMAA for those that are in a high income bracket, but that's not for everyone. So I won't go into that, but that's something to be aware of, that there is a kind of a surcharge on your Medicare fees if you have some higher income in some years. So you want to look into that if you are a high income person, IRMAA. So those are kind of the main things I think of with longevity. But that question, Jermaine, is so important because we are all living longer. I did a presentation one time for NCA CPA at the Grove Park Inn Members and Business Conference. And I remember one of the speakers there told me that they had done a presentation from someone from MIT the week earlier. And that person had said, the person who will live to 130 has been born. So it's important to think longevity.
Well, that's why I went back to work because my aunt just died at 103. And so that's the reality is that, well, we're taking very good care of ourselves. We're eating all the right foods and doing all the exercise and getting out in the fresh air. And so we're going to live forever. And so we do have to, and Medicare to me is such a complex issue. People don't realize how complex it is. And it's hard to get very good objective information on Medicare to make these decisions. So it's something that people should pay attention to. So we've got about 8 minutes left. And so let's kind of sum it up, like making the most of your money for 2021 and beyond. Carolyn, what would be the most important thing that you would say going forward that you need to do?
I would have to say it has to be and I don't like to call budget, but I like to call it a spending plan. And that's generally where we kind of get started because you can't do financial planning unless you know what your income is and especially what your expenses are. So the first thing we do is okay, let's look at our budget. And I always ask the question, do you know what the easiest way to get to $10,000 is? And they'll say, what? I'm like, that's $27 a day. So if you spend $27 a day, it's $10,000 a year. So, you just put it into perspective and, their budget is their choice, but that's generally where we start. And just by looking at the individual line items, you just ask yourself, well, is that really a need or a want? Have them pick and choose what they really want to spend their money on, and how they're going to get to their goals really starts with, is it in the budget?
Thank you. That's good. So, Sarah, do you have any last parting words for this year?
Yeah, I would just say that, sharing your life plans and your dreams requires an enormous amount of trust. So if you're working with a professional like you, Jermaine, or Carolyn, or Paula, or anyone else on this call who happens to do something similar to what we do, you want to make sure that they're a fiduciary, that they have your best interest at heart, that they're objective and credible. So ask about their qualifications, their experience, how they're compensated. Financial planning isn't just about your relationship with money, it's also about your relationship with your trusted advisor. Many of our families of our clients think of us as an extension of their family, which is really just a blessing and such a compliment. So it's important to feel comfortable and have a level of trust with the person that you're working with.
Okay. And then Paula, what about you? What are your last parting words?
More about similar to what Dave said, Carolyn has said, more establishing habits, particularly guardrails is what we call them, but kind of matching your behavior to the economy that we're in. So if we're in a great economy, it's okay to eat a little bit more steak, but then pulling back to chicken when we have a correction. That way you will stop from eroding a portfolio faster. So it helps you sustain that portfolio. That, and maybe keep a little more cash reserves on hand if you're closer to retirement or you have concerns about your job stability.
Thank you. Thank you all. Well, we have one question here, and I'm looking at the question, and I'm going to throw it out to all three of you because I'm not quite sure this can be done. It says about adding a gifting provision to a power of attorney. I'm not sure you can add a gifting provision to a power of attorney. Are any three of you familiar with that?
That was mentioned at our last one in December and November by the attorney, and in passing, an attorney friend had mentioned that too. Now, the attorney friend is in South Carolina, and I don't know if there's some issue there, but it was I think someone holds your power of attorney, but they can't necessarily give your money away if you're on life support at COVID, in a COVID ward.
Yeah, and that's what I would think. I would think, and then Sarah, who does a lot of more working with estate planning attorneys, I would think gifting provisions would have to be in a revocable trust or in a will or in some type of trust. I'm not sure. Of course, I'm not familiar with North Carolina law. I'm not sure you could put gifting provisions in a power of attorney. Sarah, do you have any thoughts on that?
Not too much to add other than what you just said, Jermaine, which I think is on point. The only other thing I would be thinking of is, whether the person who holds the power of attorney perhaps is given permission to make gifts through either the will or the provisions of the trust.
Yeah, that's what I would think it would be, like through a trust or through a will, to actually have that gifting ability on that. Well, I want to thank everybody for being on today. And I want to thank Sarah, Carolyn, and Paula for really sharing so much knowledge. These three speakers are active in our NCA CPA Financial Networking Group. In fact, Sarah is going to be partly moderating or participating in our next one. And our next one is February 23rd, what you need to know about buying your first house. And she's going to be participating as a CPA financial planner. We'll also have a mortgage broker and a realtor on that call to really help people walk through the steps of buying their first house. On March 23rd, we have Tackling Student Debt. My co-partner, Tricia Koleth, is a student debt professional, and so she's going to talk about some tips and tools. On the 27th, we have crisis planning, and I believe the speaker is on the call. Brian, are you on the call today? So he's going to be talking about actually a tool he developed for crisis planning. And then on Carolyn's favorite topic, Roth conversions, we have Ed, who's also in our group, and he's going to be talking about Roth conversions on the 25th. So what I would like to offer to the group, if you know of a speaker who's really has a particular area of expertise in financial planning, or if there's a topic that you really want us to address, if you will email me or contact Holly or get in touch with one of us, we can make sure to put that on our agenda for a future meeting. And I have a question here. What age do you think is the sweet spot to buy long-term care insurance? And I think Paula answered. Age 50, is that right?
Yeah, I thought we might have ran out of time, so I just answered it real quick.
Okay,
It's a good time.
and can we get speakers' contact information? Well, certainly. So, Holly, is this something that we can do, that can we send out to the group, maybe the email addresses or the contact informations of our speakers today? Can we do that, Holly?
We sure can.
Thank you. And of course, I'm sure that's okay with the three speakers. Is it okay?
Yes, and I just put
Absolutely.
mine in the chat and
Oh,
would encourage
good.
other colleagues to do that as well.
Okay, well, yes, so if Carolyn and Sarah, if you get a second, if you could put yours in there, I'll go ahead and put mine, if I can spell correctly. So Holly, do you have anything that you want to add about the NCA CPA or a message about any of the other upcoming programs?
Not at this time, but thank you. We just appreciate everyone for attending. And if anybody needs a recording of this session, please just send me an email and we'll get that out to you.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for these three financial planners who I think are rock stars in the industry. And they all have good hearts, because when I begged them to do this, they said yes. And I thought that was great. So thank you so much for participating. And we hope all of you can come to some of our other programs.
Thanks, Jermaine.
Thanks,
Okay,
Jermaine.
thank
Thanks,
you.
Holly.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.